My name is Melinda Gordon. I'm married. I live in a small town, and I own an antique shop.
If that awakens something in you like a sleeper agent ready to fill in the rest of the monologue, you're not alone. If you're confused, I should tell you that that was part of the cold open intro to the supernatural drama series Ghost Whisperer that aired on CBS from 2005 to 2010. The series stars Jennifer Love Hewitt as Melinda Gordon, a young woman who inherited the ability to see ghosts. The premise revolves around Melinda helping spirits resolve their problems with the living in order to cross them over to the light. Ghost Whisperer rejected many of the conventional and even expected characteristics that other procedurals at the time had, but was still able to attract and maintain a large audience. We're going to look into some of these decisions from a writing standpoint, explore the characters and what set Ghost Whisperer apart, and see how the network's involvement and different writing directions influenced the series. But first, a huge spoiler warning for the show. And an introduction. You may not recognize his face, but if you've seen Ghost Whisperer, you know his work. This is John Gray, the series creator. Today, when John is not in LA or Connecticut, he's in New York. Why does that matter? Because I'm in New York. Why does that matter? Because we got lunch. John very kindly indulged my many questions about the series, and I've included some of his thoughtful answers throughout. Okay, let's begin. From their foundations, procedural shows are structurally formed with longevity in mind. When building those first pieces, the writers have to ask themselves, how can they make what they need to decide, the protagonist's circumstances, their jobs, where they live, their relationships, and other characters, fulfill more than simply their necessary narrative purposes? This type of creative foresight isn't dissimilar to playing chess. How can you make one move serve you in 3 different ways? How can what you do now help you in the future? This starts by taking a simple need. For instance, the protagonist Melinda needs a job. Then comes the question, how could this need fulfill other needs? How can they pick a job for her that supports the show's tone, premise, etc.? In this case, small-town antique stores are known for their charm. It's an idyllic career for Melinda to have, supporting the balanced warmth of the show's tone and the relatability of a small-town foundation that was significant to the premise. It offers a way to not just support, but help establish what the show is. Equal parts charming and creepy. Antique store owner isn't morbid, or too obviously connected to ghosts, like if she were to work in a funeral home. But it still serves the premise by organically offering a myriad of ways to connect Melinda to the dead, whether it's through their previously owned possessions in the store, or from customers she naturally encounters. And it gives another permanent set location for the show to have, one that can seamlessly change decorations. This kind of foresight extends to the supporting characters. In a show like Criminal Minds, the characters are given special skills to help with the case of the week. Take Spencer Reed, who is basically a walking encyclopedia for other characters as well as the audience. Or Penelope Garcia, who can hack through security systems on an as-needed basis. These skills are built for versatility, and they come up in almost every single episode in one form or another. Sometimes they're used briefly with only filler exposition, and sometimes the plot is strongly dependent on them. These characters might have their own quirks and dazzling personalities, but when it comes down to writing from the baked-in procedural viewpoint, the core parts of their characters need to be able to organically serve the story again and again and again. And again and again. and again. With a show like Criminal Minds, the need for characters in the ensemble to have various special skills is very important, and frankly, it's much easier to do. The thing is, for a series like Criminal Minds, Bones, The Mentalist, or House MD, the recurring characters are there as part of a unit with a common goal, to find the killer, to help the patient, to solve the mystery. They might not be as effective as the main character is, but they're all able to bring their own special abilities to the table. But for Ghost Whisperer, for the majority of the series, Melinda is the only character in the main cast that can actually speak to the dead. The very thing that makes the premise special is that she is the only person who can do this, but in doing so it limits the way the characters around her can support her. Because they have less room to improvise, it makes these small seeming decisions all the more significant. For the majority of the cast, this means their other circumstances have to be written to help the plot. The question becomes, how can they organically and believably connect the supporting cast to serve the premise without being too on the nose or macabre? We'll get into these characters more deeply later, but for a second, let's view them from this lens. Melinda's husband, Jim, is a paramedic, giving him access to, well, the dead and dying as well as the hospital. Both of these things come in handy. Andrea is a beloved character, but sheerly from a plot standpoint, she doesn't serve much purpose beyond offering some comedic relief and being a sounding board for Melinda to voice her exposition and thoughts about the ghost of the week. Delia, who steps in to fulfill this role in season 2, offers another recurring character through her son Ned, who opens tons of doors for the plot to explore. Also, Delia's other profession as a real estate agent allows her access that Melinda doesn't have. Her dog even serves the plot. Professor Rick Payne helps Melinda most directly by being an expert on all things paranormal. These things may feel obvious, but they're the foundational blocks that build the world and dictate how the show can stretch its legs. Procedurals thrive when given possibilities. Without them, the writing can become strained or repetitive. For the vast majority of TV shows, the protagonist starts as either single or in a relationship that will inevitably end. Throughout the series, this main character slowly enters a will-they-won't-they dynamic with another character, usually someone in the ensemble that they frequently interact with in most of the episodes. This narrative trend used to be more limited to procedurals, but it's really become prevalent across the board now in various styles, genres, and mediums. The show wants us to invest in their relationship and root for them, and it's hard not to. Often, we witness these characters meet. We see their friendship. We see them date other people. We see them get jealous. We see them flirt. And eventually, we see them end up together. Sometimes it's a wedding in the final season, a send-off, happily ever after parting gift to the audience. Or it's also common that the wedding is sooner and they have kids before the series ends. Whatever the order, you can usually count on a wedding. That's how it goes more often than not. But uniquely, Ghost Whisperer evades these unspoken expectations entirely. The first thing Melinda tells us after her name is that she's married.
My name is Melinda Gordon. I'm married.
While for the majority of these characters, the wedding is the finale of their relationship, for Melinda and Jim, it's the beginning. The first time we see them together in the pilot is at their wedding reception. And to be clear, this isn't a situation where the protagonist starts the series in a committed relationship and it's obvious to the audience that they're not supposed to be together, that it's not going to last, while the actual soulmate character patiently pines for them until they end up together. Because that happens a lot, but it isn't the case here. Melinda and Jim are happily married and stay happily married for pretty much the entirety of the show. There's one little blip in season 4, but we'll get there. Nevertheless, this was unique for procedurals in the mid-2000s. Medium, an NBC series with a somewhat similar premise, was also an exception, but there aren't many examples beyond that at the time. I asked creator John Gray about this decision.
Well, we actually did quite a few in the development of it. We played around with so many different ideas. Is it, a very young woman who is just starting out, or is it a slightly older woman who is married and has a family? And we ultimately felt like the most interesting way into the show for us was this idea that this is like you and me. This is a normal person. She's married. She's got a business. She's putting down roots in this town. And, how does she juggle the fact that she can see ghosts with this life that, other than that, is completely normal?
So it seems Jim and Melinda's relationship being established from the beginning was an important part of the premise itself, and a way to make her more relatable. It's a foundation that's somewhat reminiscent of older shows like Bewitched or I Love Lucy, shows that focus on exploring the unconventional and the conventional married couple.
Lucy, you got some explaining to do.
I wish I had a drink.
In the pilot that aired, we're very explicitly shown from the get-go that Jim is fully aware of Melinda's ability to communicate with the dead. But in reality, this wasn't always the case. In an interview with Film Courage, John Gray explains that his original pilot looked a little different.
In the pilot script originally, Melinda, the lead, was about to get married, and she had not yet told her husband that she can see ghosts. And so on the eve of her wedding, she was really in tremendous anguish about how to do this. And she talked at length with his brother, her brother-in-law, about what to do and how to do it and the best way to approach it. The way she finally broke it to him was she said to him, I was talking to your brother last night. And he says, my brother's been dead for 5 years. And the network said, no, we don't want, she can't keep him in the dark. It's not good. The audience won't like it. It's too much conflict. And I was heartbroken. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. What a great dilemma for this character.
While they were still able to keep the plot twist alive, with Jim's brother actually being dead, this decision took a generous slice of the emotion from the original scene. The reason for this change is something that'll come up a lot in this video, because it came up a lot during the writing of Ghost Whisperer. Creative pushback from the network, and more specifically, an aversion to conflict, is what it boils down to. This is something that came up often during the show's run, and really, it's a conversation that extends way beyond Ghost Whisperer. Even though TV writing has changed so much in the past 2 decades, the notorious push and pull struggle between writer and network exec is still a present, sensitive, and notorious dynamic in the industry. We've seen versions of this struggle for centuries in so many different forms, characters, movements, and belief systems. It's counterculture, corporate greed versus creative individuality, the status quo versus originality. It's the theme of Footloose and High School Musical and every movie that pits an artist against a bureaucratic system, which is a lot of movies. In the writing of a series, network execs' involvement is often seen as well-intentioned but restrictive. They can be more analytical, numbers-focused, and data-driven. With this outlook often comes a tendency to repeat formulas that have been proven to work, and less of an inclination to take chances and back creative risks. It's a huge problem with big-budgeted movies, which lately often aim to reinvent familiar IP to incentivize audiences with nostalgia, instead of allowing for new voices and stories to emerge. And, a lot of the time, with TV writing especially, these producers and execs are giving the writers notes without necessarily being writers or having writing backgrounds. So their opinions, even though they carry weight and authority, can be silently perceived as invalid or trivial in the eyes of the writers. The popular view sees it as an unnecessary merging of lanes. Let the writers be the writers, trust them, and don't restrain their creativity.
Let's see what the suits have to say. Bet they're going to want to bland it up, make it appeal to middle America.
Our familiarity with these stories, the fictional and otherwise, predispose us to villainize the corporate drones. But on the other hand, in many cases, execs know what works and what audiences want. And a lot of the time, they have the data to back it up. Or, supposedly at least they used to. Nevertheless, ultimately, the motivation of these suits has always been the same. The production making money. Sometimes, especially now, it can be hard to believe, but they don't ever actually want the thing they're making to fail. The network's reluctance to allow Ghost Whisperer to have what they perceive to be too much conflict did sometimes influence the writing of the show. As frustrating as it is, the reality is that their aversion stemmed from past proven results. The network found that in other shows, when arguments or negative tension occurred on screen, people watching from home would change the channel or choose not to watch the next episode the following week, causing viewership to drop.
So we ran a focus group. Turns out people don't want all that controversial stuff.
But we were supposed to make a gritty movie about the real Secretariat, warts and all.
Kid, warts and all don't pay bupkis.
Even though CBS was such a successful network, or honestly, maybe because CBS was such a successful network, they paid incredibly close attention to their viewership numbers. Like, borderline obsessively close attention. Even brief, small drops in viewership in one episode of one CBS show could cause them to change the plot of an episode from a completely different CBS show. Ghost Whisperer was sometimes on the receiving end of this. Because Ghost Whisperer had such a fast turnaround rate from filming to airing compared to other shows, the network was able to change events in an episode pretty much up to the last minute. So it was a give-and-take relationship where creator John Gray had to decide when to push back and when to let things go.
Kelsey, you're okay with this?
Yeah, that's showbiz.
See, Bojack, that's the shrug of a pro who gets it.
There were some things he pushed harder on. Originally, CBS only wanted close-ended episodes. They didn't like the idea of conflicts or plots stretching beyond the episodes they were in. They wanted new viewers to be able to sit down for any given episode and be able to jump right in without feeling like they were missing anything. But John wanted more bits of serialization. Ghost Whisperer does have plot arcs that span several episodes, but as a whole, it is very much a procedural that deals with the ghost of the week. Format-wise, Ghost Whisperer easily fits into the standard mystery procedural paradigm that many shows model, but the series is strikingly unique in its tone. There's a very specific balance to the creepy, sometimes even scary visuals and plot elements, and the warmth from both the normal parts of Melinda's life and the closure the friends and families receive by the end of a typical episode. This balance is the lifeblood of the show, life and death, regrets and grief, appearance and reality, fear and understanding. None of the emotions could be possible without the show's lead. Jennifer Love Hewitt is Melinda Gordon, and that cannot be overstated. She's just so natural in the role. I can't think of a better choice. Jennifer Love Hewitt brings such an instant likability to Melinda. The role requires her to bring so much emotion to every single episode, and she delivers every time and makes it look easy. I have never seen an actor be able to cry like Jennifer Love Hewitt is able to cry. She can bring the tears within seconds and look so genuine every time it happens, which again is in pretty much every episode. I feel like it's weird to make a crying compilation, so I'll limit it to just 2 of my favorites.
What do you want me to say?
Like, are you kidding me?
Jennifer Love Hewitt is so wonderful in that role. And the thing about Jennifer, she's a wonderful actress. And she's very in touch with her emotions. I mean, she can access the deepest pain in a second.
On the other end of that spectrum, it's the same with Joy. She can instantly call upon these ear-to-ear genuine smiles that reach her eyes. It seems like such an obvious thing. If you're an actor, you should be able to convincingly smile on cue. But like with actors on these procedural shows that go for years, eventually you're going to get a glimpse of a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, that just for a second takes you out of it and reminds you that these are people acting. But Jennifer Love Hewitt's smiles never fall flat. In a sea of male leads on CBS at the time, Melinda Gordon was as needed as she was deserving to be on the roster. As a character, Melinda is selfless and brave. From the beginning until the end, she just has this sense of duty that inevitably pushes her forward and makes her confront the scary thing. Melinda is warm, understanding, and deeply loving. She's just a solid protagonist that is so easy to root for, which is so important, especially with the first season's cast being so small. The other 2 main side characters include her husband, Jim Clancy, and best friend, Andrea Marino. Played by David Conrad, Jim Clancy is Melinda's husband, and the world's best man on top of that. Outside of being a paramedic, Jim has 3 jobs: look hot, be a good person, and love his wife. And at these jobs, he is Employee of the Month every month. There is not a part of me that is exaggerating when I say Jim is the female gaze. He is the most written by a woman procedural TV male character I have ever come across. Jim is supportive.
I'm sorry, Jim. You didn't ask for this.
If you ever want to talk about it.
Jim is caring.
You want to talk to me about guy stuff? I'm a phone call away. Here you go, bud.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jim is considerate.
So we grounded him more on principle than anything else.
Jim is selfless.
Did I wake you?
No. Well, yeah, a little. How's your mother?
Jim is the blueprint.
You were a kind man, even then.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going rogue. Jim is a comfort character. I'm biased, okay? I'll admit it. I can't look at him completely objectively. He got his hooks in me years ago. Maybe I would feel differently if it was a different show, if I was watching it now, but it's too late for me. At the risk of shamelessly catering to my demographic, dare I say, Jim is baby girl. Any negative reception of Jim's character usually stems from this notion of Jim being too perfect of a character. And if we really look at him, it's true that Jim is not swimming in flaws. So what are they? I don't know, he's too devoted, he's too thoughtful, he loves his wife too much. Oh no, lock him up, put him in character jail. Look, I am not someone who believes fictional characters have to be realistic, to be interesting or believable. To those who say Jim is too perfect, I pose a question for you. Why do you not want to have a good time? Can't we just let a good thing be a good thing? When a critic slammed the picture of Dorian Gray's characters for being unrealistic, Oscar Wilde wrote him back, saying if they existed, they would not be worth writing about. Jim is not a Stepford wife, husband wife, but my God, is it so wrong to appreciate an unproblematic character who perfects the very fine line of possessing wife guy elements without coming across as cringe-inducingly put on and performative?
To be honest, I still can't believe he didn't call her back. Who doesn't call a dork like that back?
They try to align Jim with some stereotypical masculinity in 2005, and what that may have looked like in a conventional late-20s middle-class American man at the time. Jim likes burgers and beer, he listens to cool music, he wears graphic t-shirts on his days off, he has poker night with his buddies. As a paramedic, he works in a male-dominated field that maybe not as much now, but definitely in 2005, was considered largely masculine. For all intents and purposes, Jim is designed to resonate with the average American heterosexual adult male viewer. But Jim is what I call a gateway character. The way I see it, there are two types of gateway characters. The first type is a character who is of a different demographic to a substantial portion of the audience, and is viewed by that audience as funny and or endearing. Think Cam from Modern Family. The second type, Jim's type, is a character who possesses characteristics that are relatable or socially acceptable to the audience that they physically represent. This character never overtly challenges the status quo, making them approachable and non-threatening to their own demographic of viewers. But through the show or film, the gateway character subtly introduces the audience to new ideas and perspectives, subtly encouraging growth and change. This can be a slow change in the character, or it can be little actions that normalize healthy habits and even contribute to a change in society. See, in the mid-2000s media landscape of Tony Soprano's and Don Draper's, representation of healthy masculinity was scarce, to say the least. Even male characters from similar genres to Ghost Whisperer, like Booth from Bones or Nick Fallon from The Guardian, often fell into the category of deeply insecure alpha males, or emotionally closed off, inconsiderate men who lack self-awareness. Jim Clancy is a refreshingly healthy depiction of an emotionally well-adjusted man. He doesn't bottle his feelings up. He's great at communication. He isn't insecure about his masculinity. He's respectful to the women in his life. He saves lives. He's just a good guy.
She can go out on a date. You hurt her feelings, Flaherty.
Oh, what are you, part girl now? Is that okay?
Jim doesn't have to verbally advocate for anything. Simply by presenting healthy actions and dialogue on screen, he normalizes them. Yes, some fans perceive Jim as being too perfect of a character, but I think for 2005, Jim Clancy was such an important character to have on network television. And though the lack of conflict in Jim and Melinda's relationship was likely engineered by CBS as it was during the pilot, it really does bring a balance to the show. As much as I would have liked to see the dynamic of Jim not knowing Melinda's secret play out, the truth is, Melinda goes through a lot. Despite her inclination for a peaceful, quiet life, her life in actuality is chaotic and unpredictable. And some of the visions and ghosts that she sees are creepy. But living in this cute, small town of Grandview, Melinda owning this charming antique shop, even the vibrant, summery color palette tones, all of these things create this warm contrast against the macabre ghosts, the strange visions, and dark deaths. And Jim being this kind, supportive husband is a huge part of that. It's not that the ghosts don't follow her home, because they do, but there's something very reassuring in the idea that no matter what the plot brings, there's a constant steadiness in Jim and Melinda's relationship for the main character and the audience to retreat to. You know, at least until season 4, but we'll get there. And just like Jim gives Melinda that sense of security, there's something I rely on for my own peace of mind online. In 2024, we all know the classic reasons to use a VPN: changing your location to get better deals on shopping, booking cheaper hotels, and of course having internet security. And sure, those are all valid and great, but my main reason for using NordVPN is because public Wi-Fi freaks me out. I spend a lot of time working in coffee shops. I don't have coworkers, so getting out of my little apartment is essential when everything feels isolating. And when you spend too much on a dirty chai latte with almond milk, you're not just paying for the drink, you're paying for the atmosphere, the ambiance, the free Wi-Fi, and to not be that guy from the first season of Fleabag. But when you connect to public Wi-Fi, all of your info, browsing history, personal data, web traffic, your IP address bounces back and forth between your device and the Wi-Fi network. The person or company behind it can see everything you do, which is creepy enough. And then there are the middlemen setting up fake Wi-Fi networks with names like Coffee Shop Wi-Fi, just waiting for you to click so they can steal your data. But NordVPN acts as a tunnel between your device and the Wi-Fi. NordVPN takes all of your data and traffic and turns it into unreadable gibberish before it ever hits the network. It's like magic, and it isn't limited to coffee shops either. You can use NordVPN at hotels, at airports, in your classes, at the office. But here's the best part. My link, nordvpn.com/SloanStowe, gets you the very best deal on NordVPN, better than anywhere else. You'll get the biggest discount they offer, plus an extra 4 months for free. And with their 30-day money-back guarantee, there is literally no risk to trying it out. So go to nordvpn.com/SloanStowe or click the link in the description below. Thank you, NordVPN, for sponsoring sponsoring this video. Andrea Marino, portrayed by Aisha Tyler, is Melinda's best friend / employee / business partner in season 1. Andrea is a fan favorite character, and for good reason. She's laid back, warm, loyal, and funny.
I guess I'm just one of those people who thinks that loyalty is a personal asset.
She's quirky, but not in an annoying, over-the-top way. There's this line in the pilot where Andrea mentions she's recently begun studying Latin. At first, I thought this was an obvious setup for her to later use Latin in the episode, or any episode, to decipher some ancient ghost-related thing for the plot. But no, it was truly just a moment to show that Andrea has a lot of hobbies and enjoys learning new things. I love that.
I am trying to improve my mind.
Andrea knows how to roll with the punches. She's there to step in when Melinda has to do ghost-related things, which happens a lot. The chemistry between Melinda and Andrea feels very genuine, like they were roommates in college, more like sisters than friends, which just makes the season 1 finale hit so much harder. John Gray approached the 2-part season 1 finale with the intention of catharsis.
I was very passionate about doing a plane crash, episode. Because partly the show for me was a way to work out a lot of my own, stuff. I have a lot of fear of death and all that kind of thing. And I have a very pronounced fear of flying. It's better now than it used to be, but so I thought, what better way to work through that than actually just immerse myself in a plane crash for 2 episodes.
For a network that deliberately avoided airing what they perceived as too much conflict in Ghost Whisperer, it surprised me that they let these 2-part episodes happen. According to John, they didn't want it at first, not actually out of a fear of conflict, but that the town wouldn't be able to recover after the events. Still, this was one of the things that John really pushed for to happen. And honestly, I can't do it justice. I highly recommend you just go back and watch them. It's incredibly emotional. There were so many things that contributed to such an incredible plot twist.
How did it happen? I guess your car got caught in the path of the plane. No.
The music drop gives me goosebumps every time I watch this scene. I think the episodes were strong enough even without this layer, but having Andrea's death on top of everything really does solidify these 2 episodes as maybe the best ones. According to a fan who met Aisha Tyler after one of her comedy shows, she told the fan she decided to leave the series because she was juggling too many projects. The idea that this wasn't a pre-planned plot twist, but something that came from needing to find an exit for an actor, just makes it all the more well-written. Season 2 made a pivotal change with the introduction of not 1, not 2, but 3 new recurring characters, turning what used to be a very small cast into something that wasn't technically an ensemble, but more closely resembled one. The obvious addition served to fill the very visible hole that Andrea's absence left. Enter Delia Banks, and Ned Banks, her son, so kind of a 2-for-1. I like that they put effort into making Delia have a different personality and be in a different place in life than Andrea. Delia is a widow and a single mom. She's older, she's a real estate agent. It would have been easy to only change a few characteristics and details and carry on business as usual. But instead, they chose to shake it up. The circumstances and qualities that make Delia different from Andrea and her own character are also ones that the writers heavily utilize. Definitely in season 2, but also through the rest of the series. It's also one of these qualities that impacts how the audience views her. And not really in the best way. I think it's fair to say that if most fans were to choose between Andrea and Delia, the majority of them would favor Andrea. Though it's also fair to say this preference is more than a reluctance to welcome a replacement for a character that viewers were sad to see go. Basically, there are a lot of fans that just don't like Delia. I am not one of those fans. I love Delia. I love the discourse around her character. I love the skepticism she brings. Granted, part of that is due to my immense love for the actor that plays her. Where do we begin? Cameron Manheim is one of my favorite actors of all time. She's so believable and natural. She's both underrated and underappreciated. She does comedy, she does drama, she does comedy horror.
You all right, Tom? Get some rest.
But there is a very understandable reason behind the fans' distaste. Though her various fun ear piercings may lead one to believe she's free-spirited and open-minded, Delia is in fact a tried-and-true realist who doesn't believe in things she can't see.
They think the house I sold them was haunted.
Is that the most brain dead thing you ever heard, or what?
Just about.
Because of this, Melinda doesn't tell Delia about her gift right away. She holds off for a long time, like almost an entire season, until she literally can't wait any longer when Delia is haunted by her husband's ghost. Because Melinda worries that Delia's gonna have a bad reaction, or not believe her when she tells her about her ability. And she is totally right to worry, because that is exactly what happens. So before I rewatched the series for this video, I made some bullet points trying to outline the parts of the show that left an impression on me. Things that I could remember and picture very clearly before a refresher. It had been a few years since I properly binged it, but even then, there are some scenes and episodes that just stick. In season 1, there were a lot of moments from the finale. The plane crashing past the town square, the frozen flight attendant, and Andrea realizing she's dead. When I reflected on season 2, the first thing that came to mind was the scene in which Melinda tells Delia she can see ghosts. I'd argue it's one of the strongest scenes in the whole series. In it, Delia goes off.
You need help, Melinda. And if you ever talk to my son again, so help me God.
While it's easy to be mad at Delia's character because we know she's obviously wrong, honestly, a lot of what she says in this scene is a valid reaction for her to have.
How dare you mess with my kid like that? He thinks his dad's ghost is here. I heard him talking to him, for God's sake.
Well, he was. Charlie.
Stop it.
I don't have a kid or a husband, living or deceased, but if my friend went behind my back and told my kid that the ghost of my dead husband was floating around, I don't know, suddenly this is a pretty understandable reaction. And not for nothing, but in Delia's defense, before this moment, she really does put up with some bizarre and sometimes explicitly, albeit unintentionally, rude behavior from Melinda due to her ghost activities.
I need to know that you're okay.
Well, I'm not.
You're not?
No, I'm awake at 10 after 4. Why are you doing this to me?
Okay, so we're closed.
Oh, it's for my sister.
Okay, then.
You know what? Maybe I'll see.
You have to be firm or you never get home. Speaking of which, good night.
You know,
Good night.
okay. Good night then.
I just thought you were quirky.
Still, there are fans who view Delia's reaction as needlessly harsh, even cruel.
You are nuts.
And it was enough for some to fully dislike her from then on. But there is a reason for the scene's intensity that goes beyond her character. As we've established, in the pilot there was supposed to be a scene of Melinda telling Jim about her gift, but the network essentially made creator John Gray remove it out of a fear of too much conflict. He was held back from portraying this very pivotal scene, and when it came time to create another, the repression of Jim's scene may have inadvertently exacerbated the intensity of Delia's, which in her case was already designed to be negative.
And then it gave us a chance to introduce what I couldn't do with Jim, is to have somebody who doesn't know and then finds out. And how does she react when she finds out?
We've talked about how John pushed the network for plot lines that extended beyond singular episodes. Many of these are drawn-out dark spirit conflicts that build to their respective season finale. But Delia's reluctance or inability to fully believe Melinda also counts in the same regard. It's not this one fight and then Delia fully accepts that Melinda can talk to the dead and they seamlessly just carry on. Delia takes a long time to adjust, and an even longer time to completely believe in Melinda's gift. This is a large part of why some fans don't like Delia, especially in contrast to Andrea, who believes Melinda immediately and takes the ghosts in stride.
You don't think I'm nuts?
Oh, yeah, no more nuts than I am. I mean, I buy it.
But I don't know, I really like that there's an ally character in the main cast that is resistant to the premise of the show.
I don't want to lose your friendship. I just can't go where you go. Can't you understand that?
I understand that.
They could have so easily made Delia's reaction simply be a brief conflict and resolved it right then, but they didn't, instead deciding to make Delia's skepticism a subtle but ongoing problem throughout the series. It's a much more realistic approach than if Delia were to change her entire belief system within one episode. These new circumstances also set the stage for an interesting and maybe even relevant or relatable dynamic for the audience. Sure, the seeing ghosts thing is pretty esoteric, But the actual setup, two very different friends have two polarizing beliefs that they just cannot agree on, but still love each other and value their friendship and essentially quietly mutually agree to dance around the subject in order to keep being friends. That is a very specific yet common dynamic in some real life relationships. And it's a conflict that's interesting to see play out in a procedural TV series. As the episodes progress, we get to see how Delia's skepticism puts a strain on her friendship with Melinda, and how both characters deal with it.
Like something was wrong.
It's just stress. The kind that you would rather not know about.
What? Nothing?
Do you think I'm making this up?
I don't want to be on the outside of the rest of your life.
Delia, this is my life. It's who I am. There's no part of me that's not affected by it.
Can they actually change the course of our lives from beyond the grave?
I'm asking you to believe that they are.
Delia's continuous apprehension of Melinda's ability can be frustrating as a viewer, especially when the evidence is so obvious, but it creates a more complex dynamic between them. Ultimately, Delia does fully accept Melinda's gift, but over time, in a very realistic way that is authentic to her skeptically rooted character. Season 2 introduced a pivotal character in Rick Payne, professor at the fictional Rockland University. An expert on pretty much all things mythological and paranormal, Rick Payne teaches classes on the use of symbols in the world of the occult.
I don't teach the supernatural. I teach society's need to believe in the supernatural.
This expertise is what leads Melinda to seek him out.
We thought how handy it would be if there was someone on the show who knew about supernatural stuff. Not necessarily a believer, but someone who maybe taught the supernatural, its application to modern life.
John said he thought CBS suggested Jay Moore for the role, which was really a perfect choice. With previous experience in comedy, Moore brings a quick-wittedness to Rick Payne and a bold, infectious energy in every scene.
Is that why they glow?
Cats don't glow.
A-ports.
I know you're talking about A-ports. Why are you yelling?
I'm not yelling.
I'm yelling, right?
Though Rick can flit between the line of charismatic and annoying, there's an underlying insecurity to his arrogance that adds a complexity to his character and steers him away from resembling a trope or stereotype, where his logic and intellect could easily nudge him into the cookie-cutter cynic mold. Rick is equal parts curious and open-minded.
I thought you would at least have a professional curiosity about this.
Oh, I'm curious. I have a lot of curiosity about you, about what you're doing here. Do you claim to have supernatural powers?
Define supernatural.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Rick's humor is often self-effacing, and not in a pick-me, vying for attention type of way, but in passing, conscientious quips that balance out his confidence.
It's wood. It's like my head, lady. It's normal. And that guy grabbed me, and he almost... Thank goodness he didn't break this camera, because this thing is not cheap, and I am.
I'm looking for a Professor Dr. Payne.
So are half the credit card companies in the U.S.
I could hear strange noises coming from behind it, like wood falling and beams crashing.
Sounds like me doing home repairs.
And this is solely just my own thing, but I love when characters have different senses of humor. Although it feels much more accurate to real life, it's a detail that's typically overlooked. With the same writers, it's easy to assign the same brand of comedy to every character. Marvel movies are an overt example of this. But surely, just from the page, it's easy to tell the difference between a joke made by Jim and a joke made by Payne simply based on how it's written. Although he only appears in 30% of the show's total episodes, once Professor Payne becomes a part of the cast, it's hard to imagine there was ever an entire first season without him. A fast fan favorite, he fits so seamlessly into the series. Rick Payne's character brought a lot to the table. Comedic relief, another recurring friend companion for Melinda to have, and expertise in the paranormal, someone who could understand Melinda's world better than anyone naturally could in her day-to-day life.
When the forgotten return.
Death will be twice closer.
Hello, translation?
But Rick also served a purpose that didn't seem necessary until it was on screen. We've talked about how Ghost Whisperer diverted away from the slow, budding romances other shows took seasons to develop. And though I believe this decision was the right one and made the most sense for the series, it also came at the price of taking the fun tension and flirty uncertainty that viewers loved to see off the table. Melinda and Jim came as a package deal. Sure, they're affectionate and cute, but there's nothing they're building to. They're stable and certain and set. It was never a question of will they, won't they. They were and they would be as long as we knew them. Rick's character, although never quite a love interest, brings a dose of that energy the show was previously not set up to have. It's funny. Later, Rick's character is basically replaced by Eli, portrayed by Jamie Kennedy, which we'll get into that more in a bit. But reportedly, Jennifer Love Hewitt was dating Jamie Kennedy during his involvement in the show. I'm not gonna lie, when writing the script, I had to triple check that I wrote that down right and hadn't flipped these two names in my head. Because before knowing, if you had asked me to pick who I thought was in a relationship off screen, Jennifer Love Hewitt and Jay Moore, or Jennifer Love Hewitt and Jamie Kennedy, I would not have hesitated, and I would have been very wrong and very confused. I'm not saying that these two don't have any chemistry, but these two have chemistry.
Sort of a quasi-devil worship. Sort of a quasi-devil worship.
So what's going on?
Not yet.
Melinda and Rick embody a very specific dynamic, one that's full of back and forth banter. Often, Rick can be borderline flagrant with his crush on Melinda. Melinda doesn't fan the flames, she usually rolls her eyes and changes the subject, or wittily shoots him down. She doesn't flirt back, really, but she's always trying not to smile. The closest comparisons I can make are Patrick Jane and Teresa Lisbon from The Mentalist, or Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. On one hand, you have the extroverted, self-loathing, charismatic, but deeply lonely smart guy without a filter. And on the other, the dedicated, competent, self-assured, pragmatic one on a mission, who is constantly annoyed with the other's antics, but is secretly endeared by them anyway.
This is one of those female bonding moments, isn't it?
Circumstantially, Rick's professional and personal interest in the paranormal adds to their relationship. Where Jim falls in love with Melinda before he knows about her ability, Rick is drawn to Melinda because of her ability.
Yeah, she's out of town, but she sent me over to
Your wife fascinates me.
Me too.
I asked John about Rick and Melinda's relationship when I brought his character up over lunch.
They also had it was such a kind of like a love triangle thing too going on, sort of.
Yeah. I really tried to push that. They fought me a lot on that. But she's with Jim. Everyone loves Jim. Can't mess with them. So you're not going to sleep together, but people do, they have that.
Yeah,
it happens.
The flirty dynamic a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah, it was fun.
And especially for him, I think that, I think that she looked at him with fondness and, enjoyed the flirting. But I think he was a lonely soul, and I feel like he was really in love with her.
While it was always patently clear Melinda and Rick's relationship was never going to go anywhere beyond unrequited, quiet pining, I can't help but wonder what would have happened in the writer's room if the network wasn't so against the idea. Were there subplots the writers would have been more inclined to explore? Were there small tidbits of dialogue or actions that were immediately scratched out before they had a chance to really form?
All the things I wish I could have said to you, I was never going to be able to say to you.
Hey, can we get the check?
Yeah.
Of course I care.
A lot. You care about me a lot.
But as CBS giveth, CBS taketh away. After just 2 seasons, Jay Moore left Ghost Whisperer to star in another CBS show, Gary Unmarried, a sitcom that aired for 2 seasons.
CBS pulled him out of our show to give him another show.
Oh, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I was so curious about that.
Yeah. And we were so angry. It's like, don't reach into our show. It's working. People love Rick Payne.
For Professor Rick Payne, this meant he was going to study artifacts somewhere very far away. This is where the show brings in Eli. And before we get into his character, I just gotta say, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, they make it very obvious that he is Rick Payne's replacement. In contrast, while it was still clear that Delia would be, from a plot perspective, essentially Andrea's replacement, I don't know, her introduction was done with a bit more tact. Like, when Delia comes, she is phased in slowly over the course of several episodes. We meet her son, we meet her, we see the beginnings of a friendship. And it's not like this happens while Andrea's ghost is still around. Andrea's already crossed over when we meet Delia, and she's long gone when Melinda asks Delia if she wants to work at the store. Which is, it's nice. It's sensitive to Andrea's character, and the audience's relationship to her character. But with Eli, they do not give the audience any time to mourn Professor Payne. Like, I kid you not, they don't even wait for him to leave. They introduce Eli in what is supposed to be Rick's goodbye episode, the first episode of season 4.
She's the most amazing person I've ever met.
I hear that too.
When Rick leaves, he makes it worse by telling Melinda that he's going to come back. Yeah, I've heard that before. But around this time, there were a lot of changes going on behind the scenes. So during season 3, creator John Gray started getting restless. Although he loved the show, TV was never what he had set out to do, and originally he only planned to commit to 2 seasons of showrunning Ghost Whisperer. In season 3, they brought in writer P.K. Simmons, who fully took over showrunning in season 4, which is when Eli is introduced.
It was a kind of particular show, not that, it's about the genius of me, but it was a peculiarly individual show in terms of what I think I brought to it. So I was a little bit hard to replace in that way. Not that, PK was brilliant and did a lot of things better than I could do. But there was something about the mixture of the heart and the scares. That was a very tough needle to thread, and for some reason I seemed to know how to do it. So it was very hard to get a replacement in that, and so the network was reluctant to have me go. And so we agreed, okay, let's bring in a new executive producer, and we'll work together for season 3. We'll stay another season, and then by the end of season 3, it will be a nice, smooth transition.
Eli is played by Jamie Kennedy, who is probably best known for playing the character Randy Meeks in the Scream franchise. Like Jay Moore, Jamie Kennedy is also a comedian. And like Rick, Eli is also a professor at Rockland University, specifically a psych professor who also has a therapy practice at the school. Eli's whole thing is that when we meet him, he dies for a second, and then when he comes back, he can hear ghosts. Where they put effort into making Delia her own character that didn't share many qualities with Andrea, the same can't really be said for Eli. He's not as boisterous as Payne, which is not hard to be, but he still maintains some of the sarcasm and the comedic relief. I don't know, he's like if your best friend has ever had a boyfriend you secretly don't like. He's fine. You'll hang out with him to hang out with her, but, suddenly it's like he's always around. You don't have an issue with him, you can't really pinpoint what it is you don't like about him, but she could do better. I don't really mind Eli. I just wish they'd made him a bit more different. Another big change in season 4 comes in the form of Jim's death. Jim dies, kind of. He dies and his ghost hangs around for a bit, and then he steps into the body of a man who just died, named Sam Lucas. They don't change the actor, thank God, but in the reflections they show what Sam actually looks like to remind us that outwardly Jim is in another body, even though he's not. And Melinda tries to make him remember that he's Jim, while Jim tries to pick up the pieces of Sam's life. Jim eventually regains his memory. That is pretty much the gist of this arc that spans 12 episodes. I asked John about both Eli and Jim.
The whole bringing Eli into the show and Jim's death. It was PK's vision. And I didn't love it, honestly, but I felt like my job was to support PK. So I threw myself behind it, and we just did it. And it had no negative effect on the show whatsoever. The show continued to be interesting. I was worried. You see these angry comments online. Jim's dead. I'm gone. I'm out of here.
I think it's fair to say it was a decision that was most likely ratings motivated, or maybe P.K. Simmons wanted to construct a long plot that focused on Melinda and Jim's relationship. Either way, this is a plotline that fans have polarizing opinions on. I'll be frank, most of them, they don't like it. It's interesting how the way you watch a series, either through binging it or watching episodes periodically through a slow release with Twitter on standby, can impact your enjoyment and perception of the show. Like, in my Mentalist video, I talk about being very annoyed with a plot that I felt was dragged out for years because, for me, it literally was. But I found that fans who could binge it all in a couple of sittings weren't bothered by it at all. Their watching experience was foundationally different from mine. And in this case, it's a little flipped here. I didn't watch Ghost Whisperer as it was airing. The first time I watched it was on Netflix when streaming was first getting popular, around 2012, 2013. So for me, the Jim dying storyline wasn't really an issue. It was a different direction, but I liked it. That being said, I understand the general hatred for this arc. If I was a fan watching these episodes as they aired, waiting every week to sit down, on a Friday night, by the way, this storyline would upset me deeply, especially with those dramatic promos they used to do.
They made a pact to love each other.
You know what, Mr. Clancy? You make me very happy.
For better or for worse.
And this is all we need?
Till death do them part.
No! Please, not you.
I would feel jerked around. Still, the fans' anger didn't affect the ratings, at least not negatively. According to Variety, viewership rose nearly 30% compared to the previous season, and consistently ranked as CBS's most watched show on Friday nights. But with this plot, there were so many things they had to work around to get back to the status quo. For example, to keep being able to call the character Jim, they make Sam's middle name James, which is fine, but by season 5, they get a little sloppy. Like someone actually calls him Dr. Clancy instead of Dr. Lucas.
All right, bye.
Dr. Clancy, got a minute? All right.
And though overall this bait and switch garnered viewers' attention in the moment, it didn't hold on to it. Season 5 saw a substantial decline in ratings. Season 5 also brought a 5-year time jump, and just like that, Melinda's baby that she has at the end of Season 4 turns into a 5-year-old who honestly looks nearly old enough to pack his bags for his first year at Hogwarts. I'll be candid, this season is where they lost me. There are plenty of fans who enjoy Season 5, but for me, the show just became something too different. There are still crossover-type episodes, but the extended plot becomes focused on the sun and this concept of shinies versus shadows, which didn't interest me as much as some of the previous conflicts. The thing is, there are a lot of plot lines in Ghost Whisperer that don't really have conclusions. Like, in Season 2, this guy comes to town, Gabriel, and he can see spirits too, and it turns out he's Melinda's half-brother, and it's like, oh, okay, they both have this gift, it makes sense that they're related. But no, wait, it doesn't actually, because they share the same dad, and Melinda gets her ability from her mom's side. So it turns out their dad just found another woman who has this ability too. But then it turns out her dad isn't actually her dad, and her real dad is trying to save her from her fake dad, and so that also means Gabriel isn't actually her brother. And then the dad thing gets resolved, but Gabriel just kind of disappears and never comes back. It's not always this complicated, but it's usually open-ended. Like in the 3rd season, they introduced this entire forgotten buried town underneath Grandview. It gave this creepy lore to the town and put more stock into this idea that Melinda is destined to be in Grandview for some higher purpose. It was such an interesting concept with so much potential. But then they just kind of put it on the back burner and never really gave it a conclusion. This is what happened to many of the series' big villains and stretched out conflicts. It's hard to tell what the cause of these frequent starts and stops were. Did the push and pull struggle for serialization between the writers and the network keep these plots from being fully fleshed out? Or lost plots due to the writer's strike around Season 3, or the changing of showrunners? Or were these conclusions just constantly put on the back burner in order to bring in new ideas? Because the show was unexpectedly canceled in Season 5, we'll never know for sure if these plots were part of a culminating ending or not. There were whispers of ABC picking the series up after its cancellation, but they couldn't strike a deal. Despite the show's unanswered questions, when I made that list of what I remembered most from the series, the majority of these things didn't come up. It's infuriatingly ironic, but I think the best parts of Ghost Whisperer lie in the everyday episodes, the individual people Melinda helps. There's something so cathartic in the cyclical repetition of closure in each episode and the imploring understanding and appearance versus reality. The series struck an exceptionally rare balance between genres, tones, and emotions. Ghost Whisperer's uniqueness stemmed from a character-focused drive, a willingness to approach dark subjects with sensitivity, and a strong sense of humanity reflected in both its plots and its lead. Guys, a couple things. First, I want to say a huge thank you to John Gray. Please go check out his book. Here is a description of it.
Yeah, my novel, The Desecrated, it's a horror novel, or I think more accurately, it's a supernatural thriller. It's done pretty well. We've won some awards for it, and I think it's an interesting mix of horror and some comedy and some character. And the best compliment I got about it was somebody said, it's the only book I've read where I was scared and I cried and I laughed all within like 15 pages.
And also, guys, yesterday was actually this channel's anniversary. A year ago yesterday, I posted my first video. It was on The Mentalist, another CBS show that I love. At the time, I had 4 subscribers, which was just me on a different account, my dad, and like a couple of close friends that I wasn't too embarrassed to tell. And now, at this current moment, I have 80,132 subscribers, which is just... I can't wrap my head around that. If you're one of those people who took the time to click the red button, the like button, if you left a comment, if you subscribed to my channel, if you watched any of my videos, I really want to thank you. It sounds so stupid, but it helps so much. Thank you. More to come soon. Yeah, here's to another year.